Oh, okay.
They're going to record it over there. I mean, I'm going to record it here too.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Hey, I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radiolab, and today,
Evil?
although I don't know if that's the right word for this next thing.
Yeah, because it's sort of...
More complicated.
When you call someone evil, then you're kind of done with them.
Yeah.
But there's been a fellow, I've been thinking about him for a better part of the year, as you know. He's such a puzzle to me. I can't quite place him.
Though it's very fun to try.
And I heard about him from science writer Sam Keane. Well, let's talk about Fritz Haber. So first of all, could you just when did he live and what did he look like and that kind of stuff?
He was doing his great science work right around the turn of the 20th century, so right around 1900. Very distinctive-looking man, bald on top, trim, nice mustache, wore a little pince-nez. Is that how you say the? Is that how you pronounce it?
I call it pince-nez, so I'm not sure.
Pince-nez, okay. One of those very tiny, old-fashioned pair of glasses that would pinch on your nose. And he was someone who had very big ambitions.
Just to put that in context, and to bring a few other of our storytellers in.
He comes from Breslau, Germany.
That's Fred Kaufman, reporter.
Which is a fairly small, smallish sort of town. And so does Clara.
That's Fritz Haber's wife.
We're going to meet her later.
Right, Clara comes from the same town. And they're both secularized Jews.
But this was a moment in German history, he says, when Jews had a decent amount of freedom.
And this is the difference between Kaiser Wilhelm and, of course, Hitler's Germany.
Yeah, to put it in context.
Dan Charles, he's a historian.
His was the first generation when a young Jewish boy could truly imagine that he could just be a regular part of that society. He could do anything.
And he believed it. Fast forward 10 years, Fritz Haber is a professor.
Small university.
He's working with chemicals. It's about 1880.
And he throws himself at one of the central issues facing Germany at that time.
Germany has a problem.
A big problem.
It has enough, what they used to call then solar energy.
Energy from the sun to grow crops.
To feed about 30 million people. However, that leaves behind 20 million Germans.
You mean they're looking at 20 million people going hungry?
That's what we're heading towards. I mean, you have to remember, during the Crimean War in the 1850s, Europe starves.
So around the turn of the century, for German scientists like Haber, this was the challenge.
He wants to feed Germany.
And actually, this wasn't just a German thing. A lot of people were beginning to worry that with about 1.5 billion people on the planet at that point, that maybe we were maxing out, that the Earth couldn't support this many people.
And everyone thought, well, we know the solution.
Yeah, we just need a whole lot more of one simple element.
Nitrogen.
They needed more
nitrogen.
Nitrogen is an essential part of amino acids and proteins.
And when you stick a seed, like a wheat seed, in the ground,
one of the reasons it grows is because it's sucking up all the nitrogen in the soil.
To make its cell walls.
Without nitrogen, you don't have life.
Now, of course, you could find some nitrogen out in the world.
Natural deposits would be like seaweed or...
manure was one.
You could find it in cow manure or...
guano.
Which was basically...
bat poop and seagull poop.
Which made that poop
valuable.
And actually 2 nations in South America went to war.
Literally over bat.
You could say people were bat crazy.
By the way, that's reporter Latif Nasser.
This was like oil is today. This is...
Everybody was desperate for new sources of nitrogen, and to make the problem even more annoying...
The most common source of nitrogen is in the air around us. It makes up 4 out of every 5 or so molecules that we breathe. So it's very...
So it's a lot.
Yes, 80% of the air is nitrogen atoms.
So all the nitrogen you'd ever need
was right there.
But you can't throw that air onto a plant. They couldn't deploy it.
Meaning they couldn't capture it.
That's right. And part of the problem here, and although once again we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
We'll be right back to Haber, but wait, let's just finish this.
Is that nitrogen is trivalent. Trivalent. In other words, nitrogen has really strong attachments to itself.
What he means is that when nitrogen atoms are just free floating in the air, they will cling to each other. These 3 little nitrogen atoms will fiercely hold together, and it's almost impossible to pry them apart.
His calculations showed that it couldn't be done.
At least not without a
tremendous amount of energy.
More energy than seemed like
possible to make.
Yeah, yes, but
being ambitious.
Haber starts thinking, in order to do this, we need to pressure this. We need to put it under a lot of pressure.
So he starts experimenting. He figures out a way to take a lot of air, that's filled with these little nitrogen bonds clinging to each other and pump it
to a big iron tank
Under extreme pressure.
at high temperature,
And then he forces hydrogen into the tank.
Get in there!
and you have a number of chemical reactions. And what happens is that you're elbowing the nitrogen apart from itself and then forcing it to bond with the hydrogen in a new way.
And when hydrogen and nitrogen bond together, the thing you get?
Is ammonia.
A liquid that has captured the nitrogen right out of the air.
You literally get a drip of ammonia. It is arguably the most significant scientific breakthrough of them all.
Bread from the air was the phrase.
Wow. Because Haber had figured out a way to take nitrogen from the air, put it into the barren ground, and grow wheat.
This has allowed the world to have 7 billion people. This is what's driving the world towards 10, 12 by 2050. Now we're seeing about 100 million tons of synthetic fertilizer produced industrially each year, and that tonnages then moves into our food source. Our food source then moves into our bodies, and the rough statistics are that half of each of our bodies contains nitrogen from the Haber process.
No.
Really? And so in 1918, Fritz Haber gets a Nobel Prize. But, and this is why this is such an interesting guy, around this same time, officials in the U.S. government are calling him a war criminal.
All right, just to back up for 1 second.
After Haber's nitrogen discovery,
He was promoted.
You know, he takes over the leadership of this institute in Berlin, and he starts hobnobbing with a whole different level of society.
that's Stan Charles again.
I mean, it's a pretty heady thing for, a Jewish kid from Breslau to be hobnobbing with the emperor and cabinet ministers. He's part of the club, and he really, really relished it.
And not just because he was vain, which everyone agrees he was, but because he loves his country.
He loves the fatherland, and he loves Germany.
So
When World War I begins,
he signs up immediately, sends a letter volunteering for duty.
Saying, you know the process that I use to make food? Well, I can use that same process to make
Explosives?
Because the thing that you put into the ground to grow more food is also the thing you can explode to make a bomb?
That's correct. Because it takes such energy and pressure to separate it, this trivalent bond is so strong that when it comes back together, that energy that's released, it could be used for life or death.
In any case,
back to World War I.
there's trench warfare, it gets bogged down, and Haber has an idea.
He goes straight to the German high command and he pitches this idea.
He says, well, we can drive those enemy soldiers out of trenches with gas.
Chlorine gas.
We'll basically bring it to the front, and when the wind is right, we'll just spray it.
But the generals were not all that convinced.
No,
They just didn't like it.
A lot of them were like, this is not how you fight a war.
it's like playing dirty.
Yeah.
Sort of unsportsmanlike.
But he organizes soldiers, he organizes whole gas units,
And nobody even had to ask.
takes command of them partially. He travels to the front.
And on April 22nd,
1915?
1915.
Haber finds himself in a little town in Belgium called Ypres.
Ypres. Actually, the Americans called it Yeeps.
Whatever you call it.
This was one of the bloodiest arenas on the Western Front.
The Germans were on one side, the French, the Canadians, and the British on the other. And there, behind the German lines, is
Our frenemy, Fritz Haber.
Our friend.
He's bald. He has a pot belly. He has these pince-nez spectacles. He's chomping on a Virginian cigar. He was always smoking these Virginian cigars. And he's wearing a fur coat
Really?
in what is basically like the Baghdad of his time.
But
Nobody had done what he was about to do on the scale that he was about to do it.